You're listening to The Briefing, first broadcast on the 28th of August 2026 on Monocle Radio. Hello and welcome to The Briefing, broadcasting live from Studio 1 here at Midori House in London. I'm Chris Chermak. Coming up on today's programme.
With the announcement of his death, Norway marks the end of one reign and the start of another.
That's Xander Brett, who will look back at the legacy of Norway's King Harald V. We'll also hear from Lars Bevenger, who's near the palace, and we'll explore the role of monarchs in an increasingly divided world. After that,
every time there is a major disruption in any city overseas, we just pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and just keep calm and carry on.
Understatement of the year there from the CEO of Dubai Airports, which is emerging from one of the most turbulent times in its history. More from him and from our Gulf correspondent Inzamam Rashid later. We'll also check in with our own Carlotta Rebello, who's been hard at work preparing to welcome guests to Lisbon next week for Monocle's annual Quality of Life conference. All that right here on The Briefing with me, Chris Chermak. A very happy Friday to all of our listeners around the world. We will start with a transition underway in Norway as the country remembers its king, Harald V, who passed away this morning at the age of 89. The country is entering a period of mourning today, but his son, Håkon, is already in the process of succession. He's been holding an extraordinary council of state with the government. Well, to start us off, let's hear from Xander Brett, Monocle contributor and writer for Scan magazine in Norway, on the legacy of King Harald V.
In 1991, on the death of King Olav V, the Norwegian nation went into mourning. Today, after the death this morning of King Harald V, the flags again fly at half-mast. For over 3 decades, Harald, a beloved king and respected monarch, looked over his nation. Now, no more. With the announcement of his death, Norway marks the end of one reign and the start of another, that of his son, Håkon. Harald was a prolific traveller and the first reigning monarch to visit the Antarctic, but back home his reign was not without difficulty. He had not least the task of leading his nation in the aftermath of the 2011 terrorist attacks. They left the country traumatised. Born in 1937, Harald was the youngest child of Olav the Martyr of Sweden. He was, however, the couple's only son, and was at the time changed only in the 1990s, moved him above his older sisters in the line of succession. With his father inheriting the throne in 1957, he'd have to wait years until his own succession. When that moment came, so too did the final slice of Norway's national independence. Harald became the first native-born king for over 600 years. The Norwegian monarchy relies on change and adaptation. 2012, for example, saw an altering of the monarch status in the Church of Norway. Aside from his duties, Harald was unafraid to show his humorous side. In an interview with NRK, he once joked that Antarctica's Troll Research Station had been named after his wife. Before mobility problems, he was a proud sportsman too, competing in sailing championships. Harald also, and importantly, was a king with a loyal confidant, his wife, Queen Sonja. Daughter of the clothing merchant, Harald had kept their relationship secret, afraid of negative reaction to her status as a commoner. His son also married a commoner, Mette-Marit, who suffers from pulmonary fibrosis and recently had a lung transplant. She admitted, quote, poor judgment, after correspondence with Jeffrey Epstein came to light, and her son from a previous relationship was sentenced to 4 years in prison this year, having been found guilty of numerous offences, including 2 counts of rape. The case is on appeal. Also problematic was to prove the love life of Harald's daughter, Princess Martha Louise. Her marriage to writer Ari Behn, who later committed suicide, ended in divorce, and then there was her marriage to the controversial American shaman, Duik Verret. These events seem to have left a once stable monarchy in relative crisis, though the majority of Norwegians are in favour of keeping the monarchy, and Harald's personal popularity remains strong. His granddaughter, Ingrid Alexandra, looks set to serve in time as Norway's first female monarch for hundreds of years. One hopes her reign, like her grandfather's, will be one of trust, affection, and admiration.
Xander Brett, Monocle contributor, writer for Scan magazine. Thank you very much for that on the legacy of King Harald V. We'll head now to Oslo, where we can join Lars Bevenger, Monocle's Oslo correspondent, live from right outside the palace. Lars, just give us a sense of the mood right now where you are.
Well, I think it can be summed up with one word, and that is gratitude. So people are gathering here outside the royal palace yesterday morning already when news of the King's health deteriorating rapidly broke, and they've been here ever since. And today it's just grown and grown, and there are now thousands of people outside the palace laying down flowers, lighting candles, and generally expressing a deep gratitude to the king they have lost, and also remaining hopeful about King Haakon VIII, who is now the new king, who's already taken over, has concluded that extraordinary meeting with the government earlier today, and will now resume his role as king.
Well, it does show how quickly a succession like this will happen, Lars. But to talk a little more, first of all, about the legacy of King Harald V, just describe where his popularity came from, I guess. Did it have to do, the fact that Xander mentioned as well, of course, the first Norwegian-born king, native-born king, how much did that sort of change how the country responded to him?
Well, I think he felt quite nervous. He said it himself, but he has been able to represent people and make people feel they are being represented by him, no matter where you come from, your creed, your sexuality, gender. He's been there for everyone, and he's said so in so many words himself. He gave a very memorable speech back in 2016 when he said that I am king for everyone. Norwegians are all of us. So he is basically embraced the entire population, and they've embraced him back.
Well, Lars, you're describing there how much he was embraced. Xander did mention that there have been some scandals that have dented support for the monarchy in general. Just talk about that a little bit, and whether his son, now the king, can really pick up the baton, what that succession will look like.
It's been a heck of a few years for the entire royal family. The late king, was able to stand above that. He was one who didn't give out orders, but favoured conversation. So he had many conversations with his daughter-in-law, now Queen Mette-Marit, and the furore around her friendship with Epstein. He refused, of course, to comment on anything surrounding the court case and the trial of her son, Marius Borg-Høby. Obviously, the monarchy, the judiciary has to be kept poles apart. But the popularity of the monarchy as such fell for a period, but his popularity never seemed to wane. Now, the new king, King Haakon VIII, is also popular with the people. He's yet to prove himself, although he has been stepping in for his now late father quite a bit, so he knows what he's doing. And I think people are pretty hopeful that he will also be a king that can embrace the people.
Lars Bevenger, Monocle's Oslo correspondent, thank you very much for joining us from outside of the palace there. Now, monarchs around the world are maybe not as powerful as they once were, in democracies certainly, but they do occupy a special place in many nations as uniters and even mediators in conflicts. Here's Monocle's Andrew Muller with some thoughts on why the soft power of monarchs endures even in an ever-polarized geopolitical landscape.
The death of any monarch and the accession of their successor inevitably prompts contemplation of the very idea of monarchy. As Norwegians adjust to the passing of King Harald V, aged 89, and his replacement by his son, King Haakon VIII, there will be at least a few wondering if accident of birth is really the best means by which a modern democracy can choose a head of state. In Norway in particular, its royal family has not recently been doing much to bolster any notion that their blood runs noticeably bluer than that of any of their subjects. Haakon's wife, now Queen Mette-Marit, is known to have maintained a friendship with unlamented sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein long past the point at which his crimes became common knowledge. Her son from a previous relationship, Marius Borg-Høby, was convicted in June of charges including rape, assault and drug dealing. Haakon's sister, Princess Martha Louise, is a kook who claims to be psychic and is married to American conspiracy theorist Durek Verrett, who believes himself descended from space lizards, which, ironically, is what many of Verrett's fellow foil hatters believe about royal families. None of which has done wonders for the popular reputation of the royal family. Polls suggest that around a third of Norwegians would now prefer becoming a republic. In a parliamentary vote in February, 26 of Norway's 169 MPs were in favour of winding the royal circus up. However, antiquated and preposterous though the idea of monarchy may be, it does have its uses. In recent years, as the United States' anxious European allies have sought to maintain their transatlantic ties, the United Kingdom has made considerable use of President Donald Trump's weakness for crowns, thrones, and gilded carts. Spain and Denmark have dispatched their kings east as commercial ambassadors. Travelling in the other direction, Emperor Naruhito of Japan visited the Netherlands in June, offering atonement for Imperial Japan's treatment of prisoners in the Dutch East Indies on his grandfather's watch, and discussing quantum technology and semiconductors. It is the lustre of the crown itself, rather than the individual upon whom it might perch, which fascinates. Or, as one especially astute observer of monarchy had it, not all the water in the rough, rude sea can wash the balm from an anointed king. However fallible, flawed, or just plain weird individual monarchs may be, and however daft the entire prospect of monarchy may look, there is nothing to it. Of the top 10 countries in the UN's Human Development Index, 6, Norway high among them, address someone as Your Majesty. For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Muller.
Andrew, thank you very much for that. Now here's Tom Webb with the day's other news headlines.
Thanks, Chris. Chinese authorities are concerned that a newly formed lake near the Nepal-Tibet border could burst its banks, threatening rescue operations after a flash flood on Wednesday. At least 538 people have died in Nepal and over 1,000 are missing, including 500 named foreign nationals. Germany's interior minister has revealed plans for a joint task force for drone defence involving countries surrounding the Baltic Sea. The pact aims to create a more nimble response to growing hybrid threats towards undersea cables and gas pipelines. Donald Trump has signed an executive order effective immediately to change the name of Lake Ontario to Lake America. While the US president can alter the name of landmarks within America's borders, other countries do not have to recognise the change. Those are the day's headlines. Back to you, Chris.
Thanks very much, Tom. Now, Dubai's airport this week reported second quarter passenger traffic numbers, and, well, it won't be a surprise to anybody to hear that those numbers have plummeted amid an ongoing conflict between the US, Israel, Iran, and its Gulf neighbours. In reality, the fact that passenger traffic declined only about a third in this kind of environment is a testament to Dubai's ability to keep its operations going under such difficult circumstances. And joining us now is Inzamam Rashid, Monocle's Gulf correspondent. Inzi, you spoke with Paul Griffiths, the CEO of Dubai Airports, and we're going to hear an excerpt of that interview in a moment. But first of all, just paint a picture for us, if you could, of what it has been like to travel through Dubai in the past few months.
Well, Chris, today marks 6 months of the US and Israel war on Iran. It was 6 months ago when those attacks started, and it's the Iranian retaliatory strikes that were hugely impactful on the Gulf, and particularly towards airports. We saw airports right across this region targeted, and as a result, airspace hugely affected in this region. And remember, Chris, these are some of the busiest airports in the world. They are some of the biggest airlines in the world as well, and they were all deeply impacted as a result of this war. Now, we went to go speak with Paul Griffiths at Dubai Airport, an airport which was targeted a number of times throughout this conflict. In a number of occasions, it was actually struck, and there was infrastructure damage to parts of DXB, Dubai Airport. And I think what is really fascinating is that this airport, which was the target of Iranian missiles and drones, and the airspace as a whole, managed to reopen pretty soon after the Iranian strikes had started and were still continuing. There was a way that somehow, particularly in the UAE, they managed to reopen airspace and get traffic moving again, which I thought was pretty impressive. I mean, I think it meant a lot of people were still very scared, were still wary about traveling. But in fact, it was quite impressive how they managed to get things back up and running again.
It is absolutely impressive. And just tell us a little more from your personal perspective, Inzi, what it was like to be. Like, put us in the place of Dubai Airport in those weeks and months when it reopened. What was the mood like? I mean, did it feel like business as usual despite everything going on around it?
Well, look, there was obviously a lot of uncertainty. People were worried about getting on a plane when you've got hundreds and hundreds of missiles in the sky around you, whether it was US or Israeli attacks on Iran or Iranian retaliatory strikes. And of course, the airport itself was a target too. So people were just worried about even going to the airport to get on their flight. And so, traveling did become very difficult. When it did reopen, the airport was incredibly quiet, Chris. I remember being at the airport a few times to travel to other GCC countries for reporting on the conflict, and it was just desperately quiet. And of course, tourism, particularly here in the UAE, has dropped massively, and that's a backbone to the economy here. And so as a result, the UAE is struggling in terms of its economy because of a lack of tourism. But now there is a real kind of sense of hope. There is a real sense of resilience that later this year, the second half of this year in particular, and leading into 2027, that traffic can pick up once again. And that's something that Paul Griffiths, the CEO of Dubai Airports, told me about.
Absolutely. Well, let's hear now then from Paul Griffiths, the CEO of Dubai Airports. You began by speaking with him, kind of laying out the laundry list of reasons why this has become among the most difficult times in Dubai Airport's history.
How many CEOs have you interviewed that have been subjected to direct ballistic attack from an enemy to your infrastructure? I mean, I don't think too many people live through that. Certainly there was nothing in my studies which said, in the case of ballistic missile attack, this is how you deal with it. So it has been an extraordinary period, but fortunately it was very short-lived. The actual impact on our business, the impact on our infrastructure was very slight. But what it did do is it tested the resilience, capability, professionalism and commitment of our staff, our customers, our entire DXB population, who I cannot speak highly of. Everyone's been incredibly supportive. Everyone has voted with their feet and been, in and out of the airport every single day. Our customers haven't deserted us, so we're in good shape. And they say, don't they? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I think that is the case for the city, isn't it? Every time there is a major disruption in any city overseas because of any incident, there's always quite a protracted period of recovery. We just pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and just keep calm and carry on.
And there's no doubt that you went into kind of operational mode and safety mode, particularly when that happened. Tell me a bit about that. But before you do, just take me back to that time. And I want you to tell me, as a CEO of someone who's looked after this airport group for so long, it must have been quite heartbreaking for you personally to see missile attacks, drone attacks towards this place that you called home, essentially.
Let me take you back to the 28th of February. It was a Saturday morning. After a busy week, I was sitting in my garden with some friends having coffee, and then I was with the British ambassador actually at the time. His phone suddenly started to go off, so did mine. We suddenly realised this was it. And, the conflict that we'd feared for quite a while had actually erupted, and things were starting to get serious, He disappeared off to one room in my home to take calls from the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary. I disappeared into another room to sort of take charge of the situation and find out what was going on. Then, of course, it wasn't long after that the actual attack started. And so the day couldn't have ended more differently to the way it started. But the first thing that I did was just get to our airport operations control centre and really look at what was happening and just make sure that I was there to support the people who were making the real-time operational decisions. And it was very, very impressive. The difficulty as a business leader is the temptation to rush in and take charge and command is always there. But I think what was the best thing to do in that case was to be there as a source of support rather than a source of all decisions. And I allowed the team who were best placed to assess the situation to just amass all the different data inputs that we were getting from so many different sources and just to decide which was the best way forward. And then if I was asked for my opinion, I gave it, and then that was another component in the decision making. But, crucially, to allow people to do their jobs and not interfere, I think produces a better outcome.
If we look back at that kind of March-April period, which were probably the most difficult of the last 6 months, yes, you can plan for bad weather, you can plan for kind of systems failures, you can maybe even plan for pandemics, and obviously you've learned from those things as well. But can you plan for the airport actually becoming a target with drones and missiles? And I guess what, from those weeks that it was being targeted, what did it expose to you in things that you potentially hadn't anticipated?
Well, I think the first thing was that we wondered whether this would be a conflict which was concentrated around military assets. But it was very, very clear very early on that the targeting of civilian infrastructure was also something that we were going to have to face. During the crisis, I think we had something like 111 separate alerts of ballistic activity. And I do have to say that the liaison between the various military forces and the regulators and the government was incredibly strong and incredibly quick. So we'd receive an alert and we'd take the appropriate action to make everyone safe and secure. And then literally minutes later, when the incident had passed, we go back to normal. That the whole efficiency of responding to different changes in the security levels became so efficient. And again, the chain of command was incredible. So that was very, very reassuring. And the armed forces that defended the airport were just outstanding.
Paul Griffiths, CEO of Dubai Airport, speaking there with Monocle's Inzamam Rashid. You can tune in on Monday's edition of The Globalist for more from Paul and Dubai. This is The Briefing on Monocle Radio. Well, finally on today's show, a look ahead to next week when much of Monocle will decamp for a few days to the Portuguese capital, Lisbon. That is for our annual Quality of Life conference. Luckily for us, we'll be welcomed there by our own Carlotta Rebello, Monocle's senior foreign correspondent, who is, of course, based in Lisbon and joins me now from the streets of the capital. Carlotta, I do appreciate you joining us in the middle of what I can only imagine is a busy final stretch of planning. How are things shaping up?
Yes, Chris, it is a busy final stretch, but all worth it to welcome not just, of course, our wonderful colleagues here in Lisbon, but our amazing delegates. I'm so looking forward to seeing some familiar faces in the crowd and, of course, welcoming newcomers as well. As you know, this is the marquee event in Monocle's annual calendar, where each year we go to a city around the globe and showcase these qualities of, quality of life and what makes good business, what what makes good leadership. And it's set to be an incredible 3 days next week. We're going to be based and anchored at the stunning campus of the Gulbenkian Foundation, this amazing brutalist masterpiece from the late 50s, surrounded by these amazing gardens and a huge lake. So that on its own should be enough to convince those still skeptical about buying a ticket. It's going to be a fun week.
Well, as you say, Carlotta, we do rotate the annual Quality of Life conference. We go to lots of different cities. Just talk up your city for a moment. Why are we in Lisbon?
Well, as you know, Lisbon ranked quite highly in this year's Quality of Life survey that we did in our July-August issue. And there's a lot of reasons for that. The main one is, of course, its lifestyle. As you know, throughout the year, you have, warm temperatures and mean weather. You can easily go from your desk to the beach in under 20 minutes. It's a very walkable and surprisingly green city that most people don't really realize. When I say walkable, of course, that means you also need to endure one of the 7 hills at any given time in your day, but quickly you'll build your endurance. And it's just a city that really does embody a lot of the things we champion about quality of life. An airport with incredible connections to the world, a city that's cosmopolitan and vibrant and safe. Lisbon and Portugal as a whole consistently ranks as one of the safest nations in the world, which, as we know, is becoming increasingly more important and leads to a lot of people relocating to Lisbon. So we're hoping to be able to show all of this in person, alongside, of course, some other lines and news from the world of hospitality, of retail, of art and cultural curation from around the globe, and really is a week to showcase best practices.
Absolutely, and we'll get into a little bit of the guests in just a moment, but you did mention there also before where this is going to take place, the Gulbenkian, and I know you spoke with the head of the Gulbenkian, Xavier Solomon. Let's hear a little bit of what he had to say.
I think every good director should spend a certain amount of time every day in the galleries, just to see how the public interacts with works, but also to live with the works in a way and look at them. So I'm trying every day to look at different things. And obviously, not only reading the labels, I had to read all of the labels of the museum before they were printed, but reading books and, what you have on my desk, there are files on specific objects that have the whole history of that object. So I'm sort of learning also that way. That's in the field that I know about. The other fields, when it comes to Japanese or Islamic, to some degree antiquity, they're fields where I'm not an expert. I did not study in those fields. So everything in a way is a discovery. So the excitement of, learning about certain techniques, certain moments in history, certain exchanges, that to me is just a brand new world. And in fact, often when people ask me about my favorite objects, they're objects outside my field of expertise rather than the ones that I know better and have studied.
The head of the Gulbenkian there, and Carlotta, he's talking in part about the fact that the museum has reopened, it's been renovated. So tell us about that location where guests can look forward to speaking to and hearing from all of these guests.
Absolutely. So the Gulbenkian Foundation campus encompasses several things. You have the HQ, and then you have the Calouste Gulbenkian Museum, of which we just heard Xavier Solomon. And then you also have the Modern Art Center and the sprawling garden. So it's a big, big complex. And the museum has just reopened after nearly 2 years of closure. And they basically brought it back to its former glory, restoring a lot of the original features from when it was built in the 1960s. And this is a collection and a foundation of one individual, Mr. Calouste Gulbenkian, who at the time of his death had moved back to Lisbon and decided that his inheritance, all his money, would go to establish a foundation in the capital that encompassed all of these things. So the works you see in the museum are the items that he collected throughout the years. And because of that, it's not a museum that's dedicated to a specific time period, but rather of spans everything that he liked. So you can go from, rugs from the Persian times all the way up to some of the European masters and French Renaissance. It's a really stunning collection of 6,000 items with 1,000 always on the permanent collection on display. Now, on the HQ building, that's where we will be That's where we will be for the conference, for the auditorium, at the auditorium 2. And that is, again, an amazing part of this story and this ethos that the company and the foundation has to bring people together, to bridge bridges, and to make sure that everyone has access to these debates and to meet with like-minded people. So we couldn't be in a better setting.
Well, absolutely. And Carlotta, I believe I could hear that you have your next request already coming in for the planning next week. But just give us a quick sneak peek if you could. What are the guest highlights?
Absolutely, Chris. You know, as you said, it's non-stop on the last stretch, so and high demand at the moment. But yes, a few of the guest highlights. We have the CEO of Belmont, Dan Ruff, joining us to tell us about, you know, luxury hospitality, but more importantly, luxury slow tourism, which, as we know, is a growing sector, particularly with the trains that they have as well with Belmont. So that's going to be a really interesting discussion. Another one with two big names in the world of big retail. We're talking shopping malls and department stores. And while at Monocle we pay a lot of attention to the bricks and mortar and the small independent shops, this time around we wanted to turn our attention to why big retail still matters. A personal favorite for me, I'm really looking forward to speaking with the mayor of Lisbon, Carlos Moedas, to bring to life a lot of the things we were just discussing at the start of our conversation, Chris, and really hear how his vision for the city is taking shape. And lastly, of course, we have a few surprises, including a film that we've done with the Michelin star chef José Avilés. So there's a lot of amazing things to look forward to in the program. And again, tickets are still available. The last few, but if people head over to monocle.com/conference, they can find all about it.
Well, I hope that anyone listening to that will go straight to our website to take a look for the remaining tickets. Carlotta Rebello, Monocle's senior foreign correspondent in Lisbon. Thank you very much for joining us. The Quality of Life Conference is there next week. That's all for this edition of The Briefing. It was produced by Hassan Anderson and our studio manager was Steph Chungu with editing assistance from Lily Austin. The Briefing is back on Monday at the same time. I'm Chris Chermak. Have a great weekend, everyone, and thanks for listening.